So the next piece of the box model we need to cover is padding. Padding is the space between the content, the actual content box, and the border of an element. Think of padding in the real world. If you're shipping something that is fragile, you have the actual content, then you have your box that you're fitting it in, and then in between the two, there's some sort of padding, whether it's styrofoam or bubble wrap or who knows. So just like with border, we have multiple properties to set padding. We have padding left, padding right, padding bottom, padding top, or we have the shorthand property, which is just padding. That will do it all at once. And that's what I tend to use most frequently, but I'll just show padding left, right, top, and bottom quickly, and I'll show some examples of padding, by the way. If we take a look at really anything on this page, but how about something like this right here? If we look at this element right here, it's an H3. You can see that it has a background color. Here's the content itself. If I hover, can you see what turns blue? And then what turns green is our padding. And we can see that there is padding. I'll toggle it on and off. Now that space, some of that space at least, goes away. Or here's another example. This element right here, zoom out here, this entire box has content. That is our content in it. Here is the border. There's only one border on the left. But if we had a border all the way around, there would still be a lot of space between that border and the content area. Again, that's the content area in blue. In green is the padding. And I'll change some of that. I just removed the padding on the left. Other elements on this page probably have padding all over the place. Things like this right here. There's padding for sure in this table. You can see there's space between the content in the table, which is in blue, and then the border, which is very thin. It's a white border. There's green padding. Green in the DevTools, not green in the actual browser. Okay, so let's try adding padding to one of these elements. How about we start with our H1 up top? So I'll go to my H1, and I'll give it, how about padding left of 30 pixels? Okay, how about 100 pixels? Great. Let's do padding top as well, just so you can see it. Padding top of maybe 50 pixels. So we are adding space between the border. Now, we don't happen to have a border showing on this piece of content, on this H1, but the border would be all the way around that pink, between the pink and the white. So we have space between the content box, content area, and the actual border. Or let's do another example here with, how about this one maybe? Or the second one? Sure, 2. Let's set some padding. How about padding right, 50 pixels? I'll refresh. And now we have space there. So padding is actually really common and very useful. It's just commonly used when you're spacing things out and you want to make something breathe a bit more. Let's find some other examples of padding just very quickly. Here I'm on YouTube, and just this button right here. There is space between the edge of that border, the edge of the button, and the content. There is padding. And I could actually remove all of that if we want to see what that looks like. I'll select that element. Okay, and I'm just going to set padding to be 0. And that's what it would look like without padding. So the same goes for, actually I believe there's padding on each one of these elements. It shows up in green. So there's, I think, 24 pixels of padding right there on every one of these little text, description, title, whatever you want to call them. There's padding around the sign in button. You can see it there. Got to make sure I select the button. And then if I set padding back to 0, there you go, much more cramped button. So yes, padding is used all over the place to add some space and to make things larger without actually making the text inside larger, right? I might want a larger button that takes up more room, but I don't want this text to be any larger. I can add padding to pad it out. Okay, so yes, we have padding top, left, right, and bottom, but we also have the shorthand property called padding, which is used to set all 4 at once. So there are 4 different ways of using it. In the first example, the simplest, padding and then a single value. That value will be applied to all 4 sides. So why don't we use a button as our demonstration here. So I'll add a button, pad me, okay, just like that. And then I'm going to select our button down here, and I'll begin, well, why don't I begin with no padding so you can just see what it looks like. There it is. Now I'm going to give it padding. I'm going to give all buttons padding of 20 pixels. The shorthand padding property will set 20 on the top, left, right, and bottom. So there we go, even padding around on all four sides, 20, 20, 20, 20. Then we have the next option, which is to pass in or to provide two separate values separated by a space. The first value will be used to set the top and bottom, the vertical padding, and the second will be the left and right. And this is pretty common. So let's just do an example of that. Let's do 10 pixels top and bottom, 20 pixels left and right. Okay, now you can see we have more on the left and right, but we still have some on the top and bottom. Also, if you ever want to remove padding or you don't want anything, let's say on the top and bottom, we can just add 0 or use 0. And now we have, kind of like that YouTube button I showed you, padding on the sides to add some more space, but not on top and bottom. Then we have this option, which honestly I pretty much never use, which is 3 values. It's the top padding and then left and right together and then the bottom. Now I think that's just kind of confusing. Why is horizontal together? I'm sure there's a good reason, but I never use this syntax, but it's there. And then we have the 4 separate value syntax. And the order here is top, right, bottom, left. Think of it as going around a clock. Top, right, bottom, left. So this is pretty common to see in the real world. I think it's just the way my brain works. Every time I see it, I have to stop and remind myself, okay, clockwise, top, right, bottom, left. I don't know why. I just can never seem to remember it. But you will see this frequently instead of doing, 4 separate padding left, padding right, padding bottom, and so on. One line, and we could set, how about we do something very obvious, like 10 pixels on top, 20 on the right, 30 on the bottom, and 40 on the left. There we go, smallest, medium, slightly more, and a lot more padding over here. So that's the padding shorthand. Lots of different options. Just keep these in mind. This one's very common to add padding to all sides. This is common to see. So is this one to some extent. This version with 3 values is rarer in my experience. Also, pixels is not the only unit that we can use for padding. We can use any of the units that we've seen so far and many that we haven't seen yet, like ems and rems and percentages. But for now, the property will behave the exact same way no matter what unit you're using. I could replace this if I really wanted to with millimeters for some reason. And it still works, it just is a different length, a different size. It's just very weird to do that. But soon we will see some of these other more useful units. So that's padding. It's the space between an element's content area or content box and its own border. It's internal spacing, like the layer of fat between your muscle and your skin. Okay, goodbye.